Hollywood's most suave leading man once took over 100 LSD trips, started life as a circus acrobat, and accidentally created the hotel tradition of chocolates on pillows through a romantic affair. From his traumatic childhood discovery about his dead mother to his bizarre friendship rituals with Clark Gable, the man behind the perfectly polished persona was far stranger than any role he ever played. Here are 15 things you never knew about Cary Grant from Hollywood's golden age. Fact 1. Mother died. Twice in his life. When Cary Grant was just 9 years old, his father delivered devastating news that would haunt him for decades. His mother, Elsie Leach, had gone away and died, leaving young Archibald Leach to grow up believing he was an orphan. His father, Elias, told him that his mother had simply gone away for a holiday at first, but later claimed she had passed away, and the boy accepted this tragic reality as he moved in with his grandparents in Bristol, England. For over 20 years, Grant carried the pain of losing his mother so young, never knowing the truth behind her disappearance. His father had meanwhile started a new family with another woman, completely abandoning his son and leaving him to fend for himself emotionally and practically. This abandonment shaped Grant's entire childhood and contributed to the deep insecurities that would plague him throughout his life, even after he became one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The shocking truth finally came to light in 1935 when Grant was already 31 years old and a successful actor in Hollywood. He received an unexpected letter that turned his world upside down completely. His mother was not only alive, but had been living in a mental institution called Bristol Asylum all these years. His father had secretly committed her when Grant was still a child, telling everyone she was dead rather than admitting she was suffering from mental illness. Grant immediately traveled to England to reunite with his mother, but their relationship never fully recovered from the decades of separation and lies. The reunion was emotional but strained, as Elsie had spent most of her adult life institutionalized, and Grant had built his entire identity around being motherless. This devastating discovery about his father's deception and his mother's fate would later drive Grant to seek therapy and eventually his controversial experiments with LSD treatment in the 1950s. Fact 2. Ran away to join the circus at 14. Long before Cary Grant became Hollywood's most sophisticated leading man, 14-year-old Archibald Leach was getting kicked out of school for sneaking into the girls' bathroom at Fairfield Grammar School in Bristol, England. This wasn't his first brush with trouble either, as he had developed quite a reputation for mischief and frequently refused to do his homework, often making noise in the back row and causing disruptions that frustrated his teachers. The expulsion turned out to be exactly what young Archie wanted, because he had already set his sights on something far more exciting than classroom lessons. He had become fascinated with a troupe of acrobatic performers called the Bob Pender Stage Troupe, also known as the Penders, after meeting them at the Bristol Hippodrome Theatre, where he had been working backstage and helping out whenever he could escape from school. Rather than face the consequences of his expulsion, Archie took matters into his own hands in the most dramatic way possible. He forged his father's signature on a letter giving permission for him to join the traveling circus troupe, and just 3 days after being expelled from school, he was officially part of Bob Pender's knockabout comedians. His father, Elias, eventually discovered what had happened, and, perhaps relieved to have one less responsibility, actually co-signed a proper 3-year contract that would keep Archie with the troupe until he turned 18. Under the guidance of Bob and Margaret Pender, who became like surrogate parents to him, Archie learned an incredible range of physical skills that would serve him well throughout his acting career. He trained as a stilt walker, juggler, mime artist, and acrobat, developing the physical comedy abilities and athletic grace that would later make him stand out among Hollywood actors who relied purely on their looks or dramatic training. This circus background gave him a unique foundation in physical performance that few other leading men of his era possessed. Fact 3. Took over 100 LSD therapy sessions. In 1958, at the height of his Hollywood career, Cary Grant began what would become one of the most unusual therapeutic journeys in entertainment history. He started taking LSD under medical supervision with Dr. Mortimer Hartman at the Psychiatric Institute of Beverly Hills, embarking on a treatment that would involve more than 100 supervised acid trips over the course of several years. This wasn't the recreational drug use that would later become associated with the 1960s counterculture movement, but rather a legitimate medical treatment that was perfectly legal at the time. LSD therapy was considered cutting-edge psychiatric treatment in the 1950s, and several Hollywood celebrities were experimenting with it as a way to work through deep psychological issues and childhood trauma under professional medical supervision. Grant's journey into psychedelic therapy began when his third wife, actress Betsy Drake, tried the treatment first and came home appearing genuinely happy in a way that caught his attention. She encouraged him to try the LSD-assisted psychotherapy that Dr. Hartman was offering, and Grant decided to give it a chance after years of struggling with the emotional damage from his difficult childhood and failed relationships. The sessions took place in Dr. Hartman's office, where Grant would take a controlled dose of the drug and then spend hours exploring his subconscious mind while being monitored by the psychiatrist. He described the experience as complementary to traditional talk therapy, saying that while Freudian psychoanalysis worked on the intellect, LSD achieved similar results by working directly on his emotions and allowing him to process traumatic memories. Grant became such a strong advocate for the treatment that he publicly endorsed it in interviews with major magazines, telling Look magazine in 1959 that he was finally close to happiness and describing the therapy as a beneficial cleansing. He credited the LSD sessions with helping him understand himself better and work through years of searching for peace of mind, claiming the treatment made him truly, deeply, and honestly happy for the first time in his life. Fact 4. Started the chocolate on pillow hotel tradition. The next time you find a chocolate on your hotel pillow, you can thank Cary Grant's romantic scheming for that sweet tradition. In the early 1950s, Grant was a frequent guest at the luxurious 18-story Mayfair Hotel in downtown St. Louis, Missouri, and during one particular stay, he hatched an elaborate plan to impress a woman he was courting. Grant had booked the penthouse suite and was expecting a female companion to meet him there, but he was running late and knew she would arrive at the hotel before he did. Rather than leave her waiting in an empty room, he contacted the hotel staff with a very specific and unusual request that would require all the chocolates they could find on the property. When the woman arrived at Grant's suite, she discovered what has been described as a seductive trail that led her through the entire penthouse. Starting at the front door, chocolates had been carefully placed to create a path that wound through the sitting room, continued into the bedroom, crossed over the bed itself, and ended with the final piece of chocolate placed perfectly on the pillow, along with what was reportedly a romantic letter from Grant. The hotel manager on duty learned about Grant's creative romantic gesture from the staff members who had helped set up the elaborate chocolate trail, and he was so impressed with the thoughtful touch that he decided to adapt it as a standard service for all guests. Instead of the full trail that Grant had created, the hotel began placing a single chocolate on each guest's pillow as part of their turn-down service, turning Grant's personal romantic ploy into an official hotel amenity. The tradition spread quickly to other luxury hotels around the country and eventually became a worldwide hospitality standard. The original Mayfair Hotel was later purchased and renamed the Magnolia St. Louis, and the new management brought back the chocolate tradition using chocolates from a local St. Louis chocolatier, even creating a special Cary Grant suite on the 18th floor to honor the actor who started it all. Fact 5. His Cary Grant name was studio created. One of Hollywood's most iconic names was actually invented by studio executives who thought the actor's real name sounded completely wrong for a leading man. When Archibald Alexander Leach signed his first contract with Paramount Pictures in 1932, the studio heads took one look at his birth name and decided it would never work for someone they hoped would become a major movie star. The transformation from Archie Leach to Cary Grant happened through a surprisingly collaborative process between the actor and the studio executives. Paramount's head of production, B.P. Schulberg, had met the young performer at a dinner party and invited him to do a screen test. And when it became clear that his looks and charm would translate perfectly to motion pictures, they knew they needed to rebrand him completely. Grant's friends, including actress Fay Wray, who would later star in King Kong, got involved in brainstorming sessions to help create his new identity. Ray and others suggested he use the name Cary Lockwood, and while the executives liked the first name Cary, they felt that Lockwood was too long and cumbersome for movie marquees and publicity materials. The studio then presented him with a list of potential last names to pair with Cary, and after running through various options, they settled on Grant because it sounded strong, memorable, and appropriately American for the leading man roles they had in mind for him. The name change was purely practical rather than personal. designed to create a brand that would appeal to moviegoers and fit well on promotional materials. Interestingly, Archibald Leach didn't legally become Cary Grant until 1941, nearly a decade after he started using the name professionally. By that time, he had appeared in dozens of films and become a household name, but he had been living under his stage name for so long that making it official seemed like the natural next step. However, he never completely abandoned his original identity, naming his pet dog Archibald as a private nod to the person he used to be before Hollywood transformed him into an icon. Fact 6. One of Hollywood's first free agents. When Cary Grant's studio contract with Paramount Pictures expired in the mid-1930s, he made a decision that was practically unheard of in Hollywood at the time and would change the entertainment industry forever. Instead of signing another long-term contract that would tie him to a single studio for years, Grant chose to become a freelance actor, making him one of the very first major stars to work independently in an era when studios controlled nearly every aspect of an actor's career. The studio system in the 1930s was incredibly restrictive, with major stars typically locked into contracts that gave the studios complete control over what movies they appeared in, how much they were paid, and even details of their personal lives. Actors were essentially treated as studio property, and most had no choice but to accept whatever roles and working conditions their contracts dictated, regardless of whether they wanted to do those particular projects. Grant's decision to go freelance was considered extremely risky because it meant giving up the security of a guaranteed salary and steady work, but he was confident enough in his box office appeal to take the gamble. He hired an agent to help him navigate this new approach and began negotiating individual contracts for each film, which allowed him to be much more selective about the roles he accepted and the directors he worked with. This revolutionary approach proved to be incredibly successful both artistically and financially, as Grant was able to command higher fees for individual projects while also gaining the creative freedom to choose roles that interested him rather than whatever the studio assigned. Because his films were consistently successful at the box office, he found that every major studio in Hollywood was eager to work with him on his terms, giving him unprecedented power in an industry where actors traditionally had very little control. Grant's pioneering move toward freelance work paved the way for other major stars to eventually break free from the restrictive studio system, fundamentally changing how Hollywood operated and giving actors much more autonomy over their careers. Fact 7. Carried twine to remember his poverty. Despite becoming one of Hollywood's wealthiest and most sophisticated stars, Cary Grant reportedly carried a simple piece of twine in his pocket everywhere he went, as a constant reminder of the extreme poverty he had escaped from during his childhood in Bristol, England. This unusual habit reflected his deep-seated fear that his success could disappear at any moment and his determination never to forget where he truly came from. Grant's early life was marked by genuine hardship that left lasting psychological scars, as his father Elias worked as a suit presser in a clothing manufacturing plant, a job that barely provided enough money to keep the family fed and housed. The Leach household was plagued by financial struggles, family dysfunction, and uncertainty, with young Archibald often left to fend for himself while his parents dealt with their own serious problems and his father pursued other interests. The contrast between his impoverished beginnings and his later life of luxury was so dramatic that Grant apparently felt the need for a physical reminder to keep himself grounded and maintain perspective on how far he had traveled from his origins. The piece of twine represented the kind of basic, practical item that poor families would use and reuse for countless purposes because they could not afford to throw anything away or buy proper tools for simple tasks. This rumored habit also tied into Grant's well-documented obsession with dressing impeccably and maintaining a polished appearance, which many biographers believe was a direct reaction to the shabby circumstances of his youth, when proper clothing was an impossible luxury. Even after achieving massive success in Hollywood, he remained intensely conscious of his appearance and reputation, always ensuring that his suits were perfectly tailored and his grooming was flawless. The twine served as a private talisman that reminded him never to take his good fortune for granted and to appreciate the dramatic transformation he had achieved through his own determination and talent, keeping him connected to his authentic self beneath the carefully constructed Cary Grant persona. Fact 8. Turned down James Bond for being too old. In 1962, Cary Grant received an offer that would have changed film history forever when producers approached him to play the iconic British secret agent James Bond in the very first official Bond movie, Dr. No. At 58 years old, Grant would have been the perfect choice for the sophisticated spy role. Given his natural British charm, impeccable style, and decades of experience playing suave leading men in thriller and adventure films, the timing seemed ideal since Grant had already proven his ability to handle action and suspense in movies like North by Northwest, where he played an ordinary man caught up in international espionage, and To Catch a Thief, where he portrayed a reformed jewel thief with exactly the kind of smooth criminal expertise that James Bond would need. His real-life British background would have made the character authentic, and his established screen persona was already very close to what author Ian Fleming had envisioned for his fictional secret agent. However, Grant ultimately declined the role because he felt that at 58, he was simply too old to convincingly play an action hero who would need to perform physically demanding stunts and romantic scenes with much younger actresses. He was concerned about appearing ridiculous or out of place as an aging man trying to portray a character who was supposed to be in his prime, and he didn't want to damage his carefully maintained image by taking on a role that might expose his limitations. The producers then turned to a relatively unknown Scottish actor named Sean Connery, who was 32 years old at the time and brought a completely different energy to the character. Connery's more rugged physical approach to Bond became the template for all future actors in the role, and his performance in Dr. No launched one of the most successful film franchises in movie history. Grant's decision to pass on Bond was probably wise from a practical standpoint, but it's fascinating to imagine how different the entire James Bond series might have been if it had started with Hollywood's most polished leading man instead. Fact 9. Sold his shirts on movie sets. Before Cary Grant became a major Hollywood star, he supplemented his modest acting income by running an unusual side business right on movie sets, selling shirts directly to his fellow cast members and crew workers. This entrepreneurial venture earned him a memorable nickname from one of the biggest stars in Hollywood and showed just how resourceful he was during his early struggling years in the film industry. The most famous witness to Grant's shirt-selling operation was legendary actress Marlene Dietrich, who worked with him on the 1932 film Blonde Venus, one of his earliest major movie roles. Dietrich was already an established international star at the time, while Grant was still a relative newcomer trying to make his mark in Hollywood and earn enough money to support himself between acting jobs. According to Dietrich's own account of working with Grant, she was initially impressed by his good looks and natural charm, but she was absolutely amazed by his hustle and business sense. She wrote about how this young, handsome English actor would set up shop right there on the movie set, displaying his shirts and using his considerable charm to convince people from all over the studio lot to come and buy them from him. Dietrich was so struck by this unusual behavior that she started referring to Grant as the shirt salesman rather than by his actual name, and this nickname apparently stuck with him for quite some time during his early Hollywood years. She seemed both amused and impressed by his determination to make money however he could, even if it meant turning movie sets into impromptu retail locations. This shirt-selling venture demonstrated Grant's practical approach to survival in Hollywood, where many aspiring actors struggled financially between roles. Rather than waiting around hoping for his next big break, he took matters into his own hands and found a creative way to generate income while he was already at work, showing the same kind of business instincts that would later help him become one of the first successful freelance actors. Fact 10. Never wore belts with suits. One of the most distinctive aspects of Cary Grant's impeccable style was his strict rule against wearing belts with his suits, a fashion choice that set him apart from most men of his era and reflected his deep understanding of elegant dressing principles. Instead of belts, Grant's suit trousers were always fitted with side tabs or suspenders, which he believed created a much cleaner and more sophisticated silhouette than the bulky look that belts could create around the waist. This wasn't just a random preference but part of Grant's carefully thought-out philosophy about men's fashion, which emphasized simplicity, clean lines, and avoiding unnecessary accessories that might clutter or complicate an outfit. He felt that belts with suits created an awkward visual break in the torso and could make even the most expensive tailoring look less refined, especially when the belt buckle created a horizontal line that interrupted the smooth, vertical flow of a well-fitted jacket. Grant reserved belt wearing exclusively for his casual clothing, such as when he wore slacks with sport shirts, moccasins, or other informal pieces where the belt served both a practical function and fit the more relaxed aesthetic he was trying to achieve. This distinction between formal and casual dressing showed his sophisticated understanding of how different accessories worked with different types of clothing and occasions. The side tabs that Grant preferred were small fabric or leather strips attached to the sides of the trouser waistband that could be adjusted to ensure a perfect fit without the need for a belt. This approach was more common among well-dressed European men and represented a more traditional and refined way of tailoring trousers that allowed the suit to maintain its clean, uninterrupted lines from shoulder to hem. Grant's approach to accessories in general followed this same minimalist principle, as he typically limited himself to a simple pocket square and a watch, avoiding the temptation to add multiple decorative elements that might compete with the overall elegance of his outfit or draw attention away from the quality of his tailoring. Fact 11. Created a bank. Quality vault for memories. When Cary Grant's daughter Jennifer was born in 1966, he took an extraordinary step to preserve her childhood that went far beyond what any typical parent might do. Grant had a professional-grade, room-sized vault installed in his home that was built to the same security and preservation standards used by banks and museums, and he used this elaborate storage system to meticulously archive every detail of his daughter's growing-up years. The vault contained an incredible collection of Jennifer's childhood artifacts, including thousands of photographs, letters, home movies, school papers, artwork, and countless other mementos that most families would simply keep in photo albums or storage boxes. Grant approached the preservation of his daughter's memories with the same attention to detail and perfectionism that he brought to his movie career, ensuring that every item was properly stored and protected from damage, theft, or loss. According to Jennifer Grant, who wrote about her father's unusual habit in her memoir, this obsessive preservation of family history was likely connected to a tragic loss that Grant had experienced during World War II. When the German Air Force bombed Bristol, England, during the war, the attacks destroyed many buildings in Grant's old neighborhood, including locations where artifacts from his own childhood had been stored. The bombing raids killed several members of Grant's extended family, including his uncle, aunt, cousin, and his cousin's husband and grandson, making the destruction deeply personal rather than just a distant wartime tragedy. All of the photographs, letters, and keepsakes from Grant's own youth were lost forever in the bombing, leaving him with no physical reminders of his early life beyond his own memories. This devastating experience apparently motivated Grant's determination to ensure that his daughter would never suffer the same kind of loss, so he created what was essentially a personal archive that could survive almost any disaster. The vault represented his way of protecting Jennifer's history and giving her something permanent and secure that could never be taken away from her, the way his own childhood memories had been destroyed. Fact 12. Exchanged unwanted gifts with Clark Gable. Cary Grant and Clark Gable, two of Hollywood's biggest leading men, developed one of the most unusual friendship traditions in entertainment history when they began meeting once a year for the specific purpose of exchanging unwanted monogrammed gifts they had received from fans, studios, and business associates. This annual swap meet between superstars solved a common problem that both actors faced as their fame grew, and people began showering them with personalized presents. Being major movie stars meant that Grant and Gable were constantly receiving gifts from admirers, promotional companies, and Hollywood colleagues who wanted to impress them with expensive items that had their initials or names engraved on them. While these gestures were well-intentioned, the personalized nature of many gifts made them difficult to use, re-gift, or dispose of without seeming ungrateful or creating awkward situations with the people who had given them. The problem was particularly acute with items like monogrammed jewelry, personalized leather goods, engraved watches, custom stationery, and other luxury accessories that were clearly meant to be kept and used by the specific person whose name appeared on them. Both actors found themselves accumulating closets full of beautiful but unusable items that they felt too guilty to throw away but couldn't realistically incorporate into their daily lives. Their solution was both practical and amusing, as they would gather together annually to sort through their collections of unwanted personalized gifts and see if anything with one actor's monogram might actually be useful or appealing to the other. Items with CG initials could potentially work for either Cary Grant or Clark Gable, making some exchanges possible, while other gifts might simply be appreciated by the opposite recipient, even if the monogram didn't match. This tradition reflected the genuine friendship between the two stars and their shared understanding of the peculiar challenges that came with being Hollywood royalty, including the diplomatic difficulties of dealing with well-meaning but impractical gifts from people who wanted to show their appreciation for their favorite movie stars. Fact 13. donated entire salaries to war efforts. During World War II, Cary Grant made an extraordinary gesture of patriotism by donating his complete salaries from 2 major films to support the war efforts of both his birth country and his adopted homeland. This remarkable act of generosity demonstrated his deep commitment to the Allied cause and his willingness to sacrifice significant personal income to help defeat fascism during one of history's most critical periods. In 1940, Grant donated his entire fee from the Philadelphia Story to the British war effort, recognizing that his home country was facing an existential threat from Nazi Germany and desperately needed financial support to continue fighting. The Philadelphia Story was one of the biggest hits of that year, starring Grant alongside Katharine Hepburn and James Stewart, and his salary from such a successful film would have been substantial even by Hollywood standards of the time. 4 years later, Grant made an even larger financial sacrifice when he donated his complete $100,000 salary from arsenic and old lace to the United States war effort. This amount was an enormous sum in 1944, equivalent to well over $1 million in today's money, and represented several months of work on a major studio production that became one of his most popular comedies. These donations were particularly meaningful because Grant had become an American citizen in 1942, right in the middle of the war, showing his dedication to his new country while still maintaining loyalty to Britain where he had been born and raised. His decision to support both nations financially reflected his unique position as someone who felt equally connected to both sides of the Atlantic Alliance against the Axis powers. Grant's wartime generosity was made even more impressive by the fact that he made these donations quietly, without seeking publicity or recognition for his contributions. Many Hollywood stars participated in war bond drives and public fundraising campaigns, but Grant's approach was to simply hand over his entire paychecks from major films as his personal contribution to the cause. Fact 14. Became a business executive. After retiring. In 1966, at the age of 62 and still at the height of his popularity, Cary Grant made the shocking decision to retire from acting completely and enter the corporate world as a business executive with Fabergé Cosmetics Company. This career change surprised both Hollywood and his fans, as Grant was walking away from guaranteed starring roles and enormous paychecks to take on an entirely different type of work in an industry he had never been involved with before. Grant's decision to retire from movies was motivated partly by his desire to be a present father to his newborn daughter Jennifer, but his choice to join Fabergé specifically was influenced by one particularly appealing perk that came with the executive position. The cosmetics company offered him unlimited use of their private corporate jet, which Grant found irresistible because it would allow him to travel anywhere in the world at a moment's notice without dealing with commercial airlines or scheduling conflicts. This arrangement perfectly suited Grant's lifestyle preferences, as he had always enjoyed traveling and wanted the freedom to visit friends, attend events, or simply take spontaneous trips without the restrictions that came with being a working actor tied to movie production schedules. The private plane access also meant he could easily travel between his homes in different locations and maintain his international social connections without the hassles of regular air travel. Beyond the travel benefits, Grant also served on the board of directors for MGM Studios, showing that he remained connected to the entertainment industry even after stepping away from performing. His business acumen had been developing for years through his pioneering work as a freelance actor and his various investment activities, so the transition to corporate executive wasn't as dramatic as it might have seemed to outside observers. Grant also continued to stay involved with his films in a different capacity, taking some of his older movies on touring road shows, where he would screen them for audiences and then participate in question and answer sessions, combining his love of performing with his new business-focused lifestyle. Fact 15. His LSD use inspired Timothy Leary. Cary Grant's public endorsement of LSD therapy had an unexpected and far-reaching impact that helped spark one of the most significant cultural movements of the 1960s. In 1959, Grant gave a candid interview to Look magazine where he enthusiastically described his experiences with supervised LSD treatment, telling the publication that he was finally close to happiness and encouraging others to consider the therapeutic benefits of the drug. This interview was remarkable because major Hollywood stars rarely discussed their personal mental health struggles or experimental treatments in such detail, especially something as controversial as psychedelic drug use. Grant's willingness to speak openly about LSD therapy lent credibility and mainstream attention to what had previously been a relatively obscure psychiatric treatment, known only to a small circle of doctors and patients in Los Angeles. According to reports from people who knew Timothy Leary during this period, the Harvard psychology professor either read Grant's Look magazine interview directly or heard about it from colleagues, and this exposure to Grant's positive experiences with LSD played a significant role in sparking Leary's own interest in psychedelic research. Leary had been conducting psychological studies at Harvard, but Grant's public testimonial apparently helped convince him that LSD had much broader potential than just academic research. The irony of this connection is almost impossible to overstate, as Grant represented everything that was establishment and sophisticated about American culture, while Leary would go on to become the face of the anti-establishment counterculture movement that rejected traditional values and encouraged young people to turn on, tune in, and drop out. Grant's controlled medical approach to LSD therapy was completely different from the recreational drug use that Leary would later promote. This unexpected influence shows how Grant's openness about his psychiatric treatment had consequences that reached far beyond his personal healing journey, accidentally helping to launch a cultural revolution that would define an entire generation and fundamentally change American society's relationship with psychedelic drugs and alternative consciousness.